I never thought a kitchen knife could look so terrifying until that Tuesday evening when Richard held it inches from my face, his breath reeking of whiskey and rage. The fluorescent light above us flickered, casting shadows that made his twisted expression even more monstrous. I backed against the counter, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge behind me, trying to steady myself. Eleanor stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching with that familiar look of contempt etched into every line of her face. She did not intervene. She never did. Instead, her thin lips curled into something that was not quite a smile, not quite a sneer, but somewhere in between where cruelty lived. My son Ethan was in the bathroom. I had shoved him in there moments before, whispering frantically for him to cover his ears and stay quiet. He was only 7 years old, but he already knew the drill. How many times had we practiced this? How many times had I told him that when Daddy got angry he needed to hide? The thought made my stomach churn with shame and fury, but I pushed it down. Survival first. Always survival first. Richard's voice cracked through the tension like a whip. This is your fault the kid is messed up because you do not know how to raise him properly. His words slurred together, but the venom in them was crystal clear. I wanted to scream back that Ethan was messed up because his father terrorized him daily, because his grandmother treated him like a burden she never wanted. But I stayed silent. Speaking back only made things worse. Eleanor finally spoke from her position by the door. Richard is right, Sarah. You have always been too soft, too weak. That is why the boy cries all the time. Her voice was cold, calculated. This was not drunken rage like Richard's. This was deliberate cruelty, the kind that came from years of practice. I had been married to her son for 8 years, and in all that time, Eleanor had never once shown me kindness. She had made it clear from the beginning that I was not good enough for her precious boy, that I came from nothing and would amount to nothing. Richard lowered the knife, slightly swaying on his feet. For a moment, I thought the storm might pass. I thought he might stumble to his recliner and pass out like he usually did. But then I heard it. The small, heartbreaking sound of Ethan crying from behind the bathroom door. He was trying to be quiet, but fear has a way of breaking through even the strongest resolve. Richard's head snapped toward the sound. His eyes, bloodshot and wild, locked onto the bathroom door. My heart stopped. I knew that look. I had seen it too many times before. He started moving toward the hallway, his steps unsteady but purposeful. I lunged forward and grabbed his arm. Please, Richard, please, he is just scared. Leave him alone. He yanked his arm away with such force that I stumbled and hit my hip against the kitchen table. The pain shot through my side, but I ignored it. I had to protect my son. That was the only thing that mattered. I scrambled after Richard as he reached the bathroom door and yanked it open. Ethan stood there small and trembling, his hands still pressed over his ears, tears streaming down his face. His brown eyes, so much like mine, were wide with terror. What happened next is burned into my memory with such clarity that I can still see every detail when I close my eyes. 3 days earlier, Ethan had been playing in the living room when he accidentally knocked over a glass trophy from Richard's high school football days. It was not valuable. It was not irreplaceable. But to Richard, it represented a time when he was somebody before the drinking and the failures and the endless disappointments. The glass had shattered across the hardwood floor, and I had immediately started cleaning it up, apologizing, explaining that it was an accident. But Richard had been waiting. He had been storing up that anger, letting it ferment alongside the alcohol in his system. Now he reached for his leather belt, the one with the heavy brass buckle, and yanked it from his waist with practiced efficiency. "Come here, boy," he growled, his words thick and menacing. "You need to learn that actions have consequences." Ethan shrank back against the bathroom wall, his small body shaking so violently I thought he might collapse. I did not think. I just moved. I threw myself between them, my arms spread wide to shield my child. "No, stop it, Richard. He is just a little boy." For the first time in our marriage, I raised my voice. I shouted at him. I stood my ground. And for a moment, just a brief flicker of a moment, I saw something in Richard's eyes that might have been shame. But then Eleanor's voice cut through the air like ice. "Look at this," shouting and carrying on, making a scene. "Go ahead, Sarah. Scream louder. Let the whole neighborhood hear what a disrespectful wife you are. Let them hear how you are raising that child to be just as worthless as you." Her words were gasoline on Richard's fading rage. He grabbed my hair with his free hand, his fingers tangling in the strands and yanking hard enough to bring tears to my eyes. He dragged me away from Ethan and shoved me against the hallway wall. My head hit the plaster with a sickening thud, and stars exploded across my vision. Through the haze, I heard Ethan screaming, "Mommy, Mommy, no!" Richard raised the belt. The brass buckle glinted in the light. But before it could come down, I saw Eleanor moving. She was not trying to stop him. No, she was walking toward Richard with something in her hand. It took me a moment to recognize it through my dazed state. It was a tube of industrial adhesive, the kind we kept in the garage for repairs. The kind that bonded within seconds and required special solvent to remove. "She will not stop talking," Eleanor said, her voice eerily calm. "She will not stop making noise and causing problems. Shut her up, Richard. Shut her mouth so we can finally have some peace in this house." I tried to process what she was saying, but it did not make sense. My brain felt sluggish from the impact with the wall. Richard looked at his mother, then at the tube in her hand, then back at me. Something shifted in his expression. It was no longer just anger. It was something darker, more calculated. He nodded slowly. What followed was a nightmare I could not wake up from. Richard pinned me against the wall with his body weight, while Eleanor unscrewed the cap of the adhesive. I thrashed and fought, trying to break free, but Richard was bigger and stronger, and fueled by years of unchecked rage. Ethan was screaming, beating his small fists against Richard's back. But it did nothing. My son might as well have been hitting a stone wall. Eleanor moved closer, the tube in her hand. "This will teach you to keep quiet when you should," she whispered, and there was something almost gleeful in her tone. "This will teach you to know your place." I clamped my mouth shut and turned my head, but Richard grabbed my jaw with one hand and forced me to face forward. His grip was iron. I could not move, could not breathe, could not do anything but feel the cold, viscous liquid being smeared across my lips. The chemical smell was overwhelming, burning my nostrils. I tried to scream, but the sound died before it could escape. The adhesive worked fast, just like the label promised. Within seconds, my lips were sealed together. The panic was immediate and all-consuming. I could not open my mouth, could not speak, could not make a sound. My breathing came in harsh, rapid gasps through my nose as my body went into shock. Richard released me and I collapsed to the floor, my hands clawing at my sealed lips, trying desperately to pry them apart. The adhesive held firm. Ethan dropped beside me, sobbing uncontrollably, his small hands touching my face, as if he could somehow fix what had been broken. Eleanor stepped back, examining her handiwork with satisfaction. "There. Now we can have peace and quiet. Now you can learn what it means to be a proper wife and mother." She turned to Richard. "Come on, let us leave her to think about what she has done." Richard followed his mother down the hallway. I heard their bedroom door close, and then there was only the sound of Ethan's heartbroken sobs and my own muffled attempts to breathe through the panic. I lay on that cold hallway floor for hours, my son curled against me, both of us, trapped in a hell we did not create, but could not escape. That night marked something in me. Something broke, but something else crystallized. As I lay there in the darkness with my mouth sealed and my son shaking against me, I made a decision. I would not die in this house. I would not let my son grow up believing that this was what love looked like, that this was what family meant. I would get us out no matter what it took. And more than that, I would make sure that Richard and Eleanor faced consequences for what they had done. Not just to me, but to the innocent child they had traumatized beyond measure. The next morning, I managed to remove most of the adhesive using cooking oil and patience, though my lips were swollen and cracked, bleeding in places where the skin had torn. Eleanor saw me in the kitchen and smiled. Actually smiled. "I hope you learned your lesson," she said pleasantly, as if we were discussing the weather. "Now make breakfast. Richard needs to eat before work." I nodded. I cooked eggs and bacon. I set the table. I played the role of the obedient broken wife. But inside I was plotting. I was planning. I was preparing for war. Over the following weeks, I became a different person. On the surface, I was more compliant than ever. I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself. I took their abuse with bowed head and downcast eyes. Richard and Eleanor thought they had won, that they had finally beaten me into submission. They had no idea what I was really doing. Every night after they went to bed, I crept through the house like a ghost, gathering evidence. I found Richard's old phone in a drawer and charged it secretly, using it to record audio. When he came home drunk and started his nightly rants, I positioned it on a high shelf in the living room where it would not be noticed, and I captured everything. His slurred threats, his violent outbursts, Eleanor's cold encouragement, the sound of breaking dishes, and Ethan's frightened cries. I took photographs, not just of the bruises on my arms and Ethan's back, but of the general state of the house, when Richard went on one of his rampages. Broken furniture, holes punched in walls, the liquor bottles that accumulated in the trash. I documented everything with the cold precision of someone building a legal case, because that was exactly what I was doing. I also started digging into Richard's business. He did side work at a local auto repair shop, taking cash payments under the table to avoid taxes. I found receipts carefully hidden in his toolbox in the garage. I photographed those too. I made notes of dates and amounts. I became meticulous, careful, thorough. But perhaps my most important action was reaching out to someone from my past. Officer Jessica Miller had been my friend in high school, back before I met Richard, back when I still believed my life could be something other than survival. We had lost touch over the years, the way people do, but I knew she worked for the local police department now. I created an anonymous email account at the public library and sent her a message. I did not identify myself at first. I just expressed concern about a family in our neighborhood, about signs of domestic violence, about a child who might be in danger. I planted seeds. I made her aware. I prepared the ground for what was coming. Ethan, my brave little boy, became my ally. Without fully understanding why, I taught him things that no 7-year-old should have to learn. How to move silently through the house at night. How to observe without being noticed. How to memorize details and report them back to me. I told him stories framing it all as a game, a secret mission that only we knew about. If something bad happens and Mommy cannot help you, you run to Mr. Peterson's house next door. You bang on his door and you tell him you need help. Can you remember that? Ethan nodded solemnly every time, his young face far too serious for his age. I can remember, Mommy. Mr. Peterson's house. I will be brave. You are already the bravest boy I know, I whispered, hugging him tight. And soon, very soon, we are going to go on an adventure together, just you and me. Mr. Peterson was another piece of my plan. He was an elderly widower who had lived next door for 30 years. He had kind eyes and a gentle manner, and he often gave Ethan candy when we saw him outside. He had noticed things. I could tell by the way he looked at us, by the concerned questions he asked in a low voice when Richard was not around. Everything all right over there, Sarah? I heard some noise last night. I always smiled and deflected. But one afternoon when Ethan was playing in the yard and Mr. Peterson called him over for a popsicle, I slipped a note into my son's pocket. It said simply, "I need help. Please watch for us. Please be ready." I saw Mr. Peterson find it when Ethan turned his back. I saw his face change from confusion to understanding to grim determination. He looked up and met my eyes across the fence. He nodded once. That was all I needed. I also saved money. Every penny I could scrape together from grocery shopping, from loose change Richard left lying around from returning bottles and cans. I hid the bills in a tampon box under the bathroom sink, knowing Richard would never look there. I made copies of important documents: Ethan's birth certificate, my driver's license, social security cards. I stored them in a waterproof bag and hid them in the bottom of Ethan's toy chest, buried under stuffed animals. I planned our escape for a Wednesday in late September. Richard and Eleanor had been invited to a church event, a fundraiser dinner where Eleanor could maintain her facade of being a pillar of the community. They would be gone for at least 3 hours, maybe 4 if they stayed for the social hour afterward. Ethan would still be at school. I would pick him up and we would leave immediately. No goodbyes, no looking back. But then, 2 days before our planned escape, Richard came home early from work. I was in the bedroom, my small duffel bag open on the bed, nearly packed with our essential items. I heard the front door open and my heart stopped. I scrambled to shove everything back into the closet, but I was not fast enough. Richard appeared in the doorway, his eyes suspicious and cold. "What are you doing, Joel?" he asked, his gaze moving from me to the closet and back again. My mind raced. I forced my face into a neutral expression, even managed a small smile. "Just cleaning out some old clothes. I thought I might donate them to the church." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to decide whether to believe me. Eleanor appeared behind him, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Going through things, are we? Let me see what you are getting rid of. We would not want you to accidentally give away anything important." She pushed past Richard and opened the closet, running her thin fingers over the hangers. I held my breath, praying she would not look down, would not see the duffel bag I had hastily shoved onto the floor. But luck was with me that day. She examined a few blouses, made some dismissive comments about my taste in clothing, and then lost interest. "Do what you want with your rags," she said. "Just make sure dinner is ready on time." They left the room, and I sagged against the wall, my whole body shaking with the close call. That night, I moved the duffel bag to Mr. Peterson's garage, passing it over the fence when no one was watching. He took it without a word and hid it for me. We were almost ready. The Wednesday of the church event finally arrived. I woke up that morning with a strange sense of calm. This was it. Today was the day I would change our lives forever. I got Ethan ready for school, kissed his forehead, and told him to be ready when I picked him up. Remember how I said we would go on an adventure? Today is the day. His eyes went wide with excitement and fear. Really, today? Today, I confirmed. Be brave, my love. Be ready. Richard and Eleanor left at 5:30, dressed in their Sunday best, ready to smile and shake hands and pretend to be good people. I watched their car pull out of the driveway, and I counted to 100 before I moved. Then I was a whirlwind of action. I grabbed the few remaining items we needed, stuffed them into a backpack. I retrieved the duffel bag from Mr. Peterson, who squeezed my hand and whispered, "God bless you both. Be safe." I picked up Ethan from school, and instead of driving home, I turned toward the train station. Ethan looked up at me with questions in his eyes, but he did not say anything. He trusted me completely. That trust was both humbling and terrifying. I could not fail him. I would not fail him. At the train station, I bought 2 tickets to a city 3 hours away, a place where we had no connections, where Richard and Eleanor would never think to look. As the train pulled out of the station, I watched our town disappear behind us, and for the first time in 8 years, I felt like I could breathe. Ethan leaned against me, clutching his favorite stuffed rabbit, and whispered, "Are we safe now, Mommy?" I kissed the top of his head. "We are getting there, baby. We are getting there." The city was overwhelming at first. The noise, the crowds, the sheer size of everything. But I had planned for this too. Through my anonymous email account, I had connected with an organization that helped domestic violence survivors. They put me in touch with Maria, a woman who ran a small boarding house and who understood what it meant to escape from danger. She welcomed us with open arms, asking no questions, expecting nothing but whatever rent I could afford. Maria was in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands that had clearly known hard work. She was an immigrant from El Salvador, and she told me in accented English that she understood what it meant to flee from violence, to start over with nothing but hope and determination. She gave us a small room on the 2nd floor. It had a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the street. It was not much, but it was ours. It was safe. It was free from fear. I found work quickly. I had to. I took a job as a waitress at a diner near the boarding house, working the breakfast and lunch shifts. The pay was not great, but the tips helped, and the owner was understanding about my situation. I also picked up evening work cleaning offices, scrubbing toilets, and emptying trash cans in corporate buildings after everyone had gone home. It was exhausting, but I did not care. Every dollar I earned was a dollar toward building a new life for my son. Ethan enrolled in a local elementary school. On his first day, I walked him to the building and watched him disappear through the doors, my heart in my throat. What if Richard found us? What if he came to the school? But days passed, then weeks, and nothing happened. Ethan started to smile more, started to laugh, started to be a kid again. Meanwhile, back in our old town, Richard and Eleanor were losing their minds. I knew this because Officer Miller, who had been investigating based on my anonymous tips, occasionally sent me updates through our secure email. They had reported Ethan and me as missing persons. They had called everyone we knew, demanding information. They had even posted on social media, complete with photos of us claiming I was mentally unstable and had kidnapped my own child. Eleanor had written a long emotional post about how worried she was, how she just wanted her grandson back safely, how she feared for our well-being. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, and many people believed her. After all, Eleanor had spent decades building her reputation as a good Christian woman, a devoted grandmother, a pillar of the community. Why would anyone doubt her? But I had prepared for this too. It was time to release the first wave of evidence. Using my anonymous account, I created posts in several local community groups, particularly the church group, where Eleanor held so much sway. I did not use my name. I did not identify myself. I simply wrote, "Before you believe everything you hear about missing persons, maybe you should know the truth about what goes on behind closed doors." Then I uploaded the audio recordings. Richard's drunken rages, his threats, the sound of things breaking, Ethan's terrified cries, and worst of all, the recording I had managed to capture of the night they sealed my mouth shut. Eleanor's voice was clear as crystal. "Shut her up, Richard. Shut her mouth so we can finally have some peace." The response was immediate and explosive. People who had known Richard and Eleanor for years suddenly saw them in a completely different light. The church group erupted in shock and outrage. Neighbors came forward with their own stories of concerning behavior they had witnessed but never reported. Mr. Peterson spoke up, describing the bruises he had seen on Ethan, the fear he had observed in my eyes. Eleanor's carefully constructed image shattered like glass. Her friends stopped calling. Her church positions were quietly revoked. People crossed the street to avoid her. Richard fared no better. His co-workers at the repair shop started asking questions. His drinking buddy stopped inviting him out. The social isolation was swift and merciless. But I was not done. The damage to their reputation was satisfying, but it was not enough. They had hurt my child. They had traumatized him in ways that would take years of therapy to heal. They needed to face real consequences, legal consequences. I had evidence of Richard's tax evasion. Months of documented cash payment services rendered off-the-books income deliberately hidden from the IRS. I compiled everything into a neat package and sent it anonymously to the state tax authority. I included dates, amounts, names of customers who had paid cash. I made it impossible for them to ignore. I also sent everything related to the child abuse to Child Protective Services. The photographs of bruises, the recordings of violence, medical records from the one time. I had been brave enough to take Ethan to the doctor, and the doctor had noted injuries consistent with physical abuse before I panicked and fled. I sent it all. Officer Miller, my old friend who had been investigating, finally had enough evidence to take action. She obtained a warrant and went to Richard and Eleanor's house with backup. They searched the premises and found even more than I had documented. Drug paraphernalia in Richard's workshop, alcohol stashed in quantities that suggested serious addiction, the holes in the walls that had never been repaired, the general state of neglect and violence. Richard was arrested on multiple charges: tax evasion, child abuse, assault. The list went on. Eleanor was charged as an accomplice and with child endangerment. They both made bail, but the legal proceedings had begun, and there was no stopping them now. Through all of this, I kept Ethan and myself safe in our new city. Maria became like a mother to me, the kind of mother I had always wished Eleanor could be. She taught me to be strong, without being hard, to be protective, without being paranoid. She watched Ethan while I worked my double shifts, and she never asked for anything in return beyond the modest rent I paid. Ethan started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Chen, who specialized in childhood trauma. At first, he did not want to talk. He would sit in her office and stare at the floor, clutching his stuffed rabbit. But Dr. Chen was patient. She used play therapy, art therapy, simple conversation. Slowly, Ethan began to open up. He drew pictures of the things that had happened to him. He talked about his nightmares. He started to heal. I started therapy too. I had never thought I needed it, had always told myself I was strong enough to handle everything on my own. But Maria insisted, and she was right. I had trauma too. Years of abuse had left scars. I could not see, but could definitely feel. My therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, helped me understand that what had happened to me was not my fault, that I had not deserved any of it, that survival was not weakness, but strength. Months passed. Fall turned to winter. Ethan celebrated his 8th birthday with a small party at the boarding house. Maria baked a cake. A few kids from his new school came over. There were balloons and presents and laughter, real laughter, the kind that comes from joy instead of nervous tension. I watched my son blow out his candles and make a wish, and I felt tears streaming down my face. Happy tears this time. In January, Richard and Eleanor went to trial. Officer Miller called to let me know the dates. She asked if I wanted to testify in person. I thought about it long and hard. Part of me wanted to face them in that courtroom, wanted to look them in the eyes and tell them exactly what they had done to us. But another part of me, the part that was focused on healing and moving forward, knew that I did not need that confrontation. The evidence spoke for itself. I sent a written victim impact statement instead. I described the years of abuse, the fear, the pain, the way they had damaged my son. I did not hold back. I did not sugarcoat. I laid it all out in painful detail, and I made sure the judge understood exactly who these people were behind their masks of respectability. The trial was not long. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Eleanor, as an accomplice, received 3 years probation and a restraining order that prevented her from coming anywhere near Ethan or me. The judge's words during sentencing were harsh and unforgiving. He called their behavior reprehensible and a betrayal of the most fundamental duties of family. When Officer Miller called to tell me the verdict, I sat down on my bed and cried. Not sad tears, but tears of relief and vindication. Justice had been served. My son was safe. We were free. Eleanor's punishment, however, went beyond the legal system. The community that had once revered her now reviled her. She lost everything that mattered to her, her reputation, her social standing, her position of influence. She became a pariah, and that isolation was perhaps worse for her than any jail sentence could have been. Officer Miller told me that Eleanor had been seen sitting alone in her house, staring out the window at the empty street, a shell of the woman she had once been. I felt no pity for her. She had made her choices. She had enabled abuse. She had participated in it. Now she had to live with the consequences. As for me and Ethan, we continued to build our new life. Spring came bringing warmth and renewal. I had saved enough money to rent a small apartment of our own, though Maria cried when we moved out. We promised to visit often, and we kept that promise. She had become family in the truest sense of the word. One Saturday in April, Ethan brought home a drawing from school. His teacher had asked the students to draw their hero. I expected him to draw a superhero, maybe Spider-Man or Iron Man. But when I unfolded the paper, I saw 2 figures holding hands on a beach, the sun bright overhead. One was clearly me with my long hair and smile. The other was a small boy with a stuffed rabbit tucked under his arm. At the top of the page in his careful, wobbly handwriting, he had written, "My mom is my hero. I love you." I held that picture and I cried. I cried for everything we had lost. I cried for everything we had survived. And I cried for everything we had gained. That evening, Ethan and I walked through our new neighborhood. It was a safe area with tree-lined streets and families out enjoying the warm weather. Kids rode bikes, couples walked dogs. Everything was normal and peaceful, and I realized that this was what life was supposed to be like. Not perfect, but safe. Not without challenges, but without fear. Ethan ran ahead of me, chasing a butterfly, his laughter ringing through the air. I watched him and felt a surge of fierce love and pride. He was going to be okay. We were going to be okay. We stopped at a small park and sat on a bench. Ethan climbed into my lap, even though he was getting too big for it, and rested his head against my shoulder. "Mommy," he said softly, "I'm glad we went on that adventure." I kissed the top of his head. "Me too, baby, me too." "Are we ever going back?" "No," I said firmly. "Never. This is our home now. This is where we belong." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Good, I like it here. I like our apartment. I like Miss Maria. I like my new school." "What do you like most?" I asked, curious. He thought about it seriously. "I like that nobody yells here. I like that nobody hits. I like that you smile now." His words broke my heart and mended it at the same time. I had not realized how much my lack of smiling had affected him, but of course he had noticed. Children notice everything. "I smile because I'm happy," I told him honestly. "I'm happy because we're safe, we're free, and we have a good life ahead of us." "The best life," Ethan agreed, and then he squirmed off my lap to chase after that butterfly again. I sat there on that park bench as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, silent and broken, with her mouth literally sealed shut. I thought about the fear, the pain, the endless cycle of abuse. And I thought about the woman I was now, scarred but stronger, wounded but healing. I had found my voice again, not just the literal ability to speak, though that was certainly part of it, but my real voice, the one that came from deep inside, the one that said no when something was wrong, that said yes to things that brought joy, that said this is who I am, and this is what I deserve. As I watched Ethan play in the fading light, I whispered a promise to both of us. I will never let anyone hurt you again. I will never let anyone silence me again. We are going to live our lives on our own terms with dignity and respect and love. This is our new beginning. The butterfly Ethan had been chasing landed on a nearby flower, its wings iridescent in the sunset. Ethan stopped running and simply watched it, his face full of wonder. In that moment, he looked like what he was, a child who was learning to feel safe again, a child who was discovering joy. I had done that. I had saved him. And in the process, I had saved myself. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be setbacks and challenges. Ethan would have bad days when the memories came back. I would have moments of doubt and fear, but we would face it all together and we would keep moving forward. Because that is what survivors do. We survive and then we thrive. As darkness began to fall, I called Ethan over. "Time to go home, sweetheart." He ran to me and took my hand, his small fingers wrapping around mine with complete trust. We walked back to our apartment together, mother and son survivors, and victors ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. That night after Ethan was asleep, I stood by the window of our apartment and looked out at the city lights twinkling below. Somewhere 3 hours away, Richard sat in a prison cell and Eleanor sat in her empty house. Their lives had been destroyed by their own cruelty, their own choices. They had lost everything because they had taken everything from others. But Ethan and I, we had lost things too, but we had gained so much more. We had gained freedom, safety, peace. The chance to be who we really were without fear or shame. We had gained our voices back. I touched my lips, remembering the feeling of the adhesive. The panic, the helplessness. That woman seemed like a stranger now. I was not her anymore. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. I whispered into the darkness to that old version of myself, to anyone who might be living through what I had endured. You can escape. You can survive. You can build a new life. It will be hard, but it is possible. Do not give up. Keep fighting. Keep hoping. Keep believing that you deserve better because you do. The city hummed with life below me, full of millions of stories, millions of struggles, millions of triumphs. Mine was just one among many. But it was mine and I had fought for it with everything I had. I closed the curtains and went to check on Ethan one last time before bed. He was sleeping peacefully, his stuffed rabbit tucked under his arm, his face relaxed and calm. No nightmares tonight, no fear, just the deep, restful sleep of a child who finally felt safe. I pulled his blanket up a little higher and kissed his forehead. "Sweet dreams, my brave boy," I whispered. "Tomorrow is going to be another beautiful day." Summer arrived with the heat that made the city shimmer and pulse with life. Ethan finished second grade with good marks, and his teacher wrote in his report card that he was a thoughtful, kind student who has shown remarkable growth this year. I cried when I read those words. Growth. Yes, that was exactly what we had both been doing. Growing, healing, becoming. I received a promotion at the diner. The owner, a gruff but kind-hearted man named Frank, made me assistant manager. It came with a raise and better hours, which meant I could quit my night cleaning job and actually spend evenings with Ethan. We established routines that normal families had. Dinner together at the table, homework time, reading before bed. Simple things that once seemed impossible now filled our days with ordinary magic. But there were still shadows. One night in July, I received a notification on my phone. Eleanor had tried to friend me on social media under a fake name. I recognized her immediately from the profile picture, which showed only her hands holding a coffee cup, the same hands that had held that tube of adhesive. My blood ran cold. She was looking for us, still trying to reach us, still believing she had some right to be in our lives. I blocked the account immediately and reported it. Then I called Officer Miller. She listened to my concerns and assured me that Eleanor was still under her restraining order. "If she violates it in any way, she goes to jail," Miller said firmly. "She knows this. She's testing boundaries, but she won't come near you. I'll make sure of it." Still, I upgraded our security. I installed better locks on our apartment door. I varied our routines so we were not predictable. I taught Ethan to never give out personal information to strangers, to always tell me if anyone approached him asking questions. The fear had crept back in just a little, just enough to remind me that freedom was something we had to actively protect. A week later, Miller called me with news. Richard had been attacked in prison by another inmate who had heard about his child abuse conviction. Prisoners, it seemed, had their own code of justice, and those who hurt children were at the bottom of the hierarchy. Richard had survived, but he was in the hospital with serious injuries. Miller wanted to know if I felt any sympathy. I thought about it carefully before answering. "I don't wish him dead," I said slowly. "But I don't feel sorry for him either. He made choices. Now he's experiencing consequences. That's not cruelty. That's just reality." Miller was quiet for a moment, then said, "You've become very strong, Sarah. I'm proud of you." Her words meant more to me than she could know. This woman who had once been my high school friend, who had believed my anonymous tips when no one else would, who had pursued justice when it would have been easier to look away. She was a hero in her own right, and I told her so. "I'm just doing my job," she said, but I could hear the smile in her voice. "You're the one who did the hard part. You saved yourself and your son. You gathered evidence. You built a case. You escaped. All I did was follow the trail you left." After we hung up, I sat for a long time thinking about heroism, about what it meant to save yourself, about the difference between being a victim and being a survivor. I had been both. Maybe everyone who survives trauma is both. But the important thing was that I had not stayed a victim. I had refused to let that be the end of my story. In August, Ethan and I took our first real vacation. Nothing extravagant, just a weekend trip to the beach 2 hours away. We rented a small room in a modest motel and spent 2 days playing in the sand and swimming in the waves. Ethan built elaborate sandcastles and then laughed as the tide washed them away. "It's okay, Mommy," he said. "I can always build new ones." Such wisdom from someone so young. Yes, when things get destroyed, you can always build new ones. That was exactly what we had done with our lives. On our last evening at the beach, we walked along the shore as the sun set. The sky was painted in brilliant oranges and purples, and the waves crashed with a rhythm that felt like the heartbeat of something eternal. Ethan ran ahead of me, collecting shells, his laughter carried on the salt-scented breeze. I stood there with my feet in the cool water and felt something shift inside me. It was a release, a letting go of the last remnants of the woman who had lived in fear. I was not running anymore. I was not hiding. I was living, really living with intention and joy and purpose. "Mommy, look," Ethan called, running back to me with something cupped in his hands. He opened them carefully to reveal a perfect sand dollar whole and unbroken. "It's for you, because you're special." I took the fragile treasure and held it like the gift it was. "Thank you, baby. I'll keep it forever." "Just like I'll keep you forever," he said seriously. "You're my best friend, Mommy." My throat tightened with emotion. "And you're mine, sweetheart. Always." We walked back to the motel as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. That night, with the sound of the ocean in the background and my son sleeping safely beside me, I felt something I had not felt in years. I felt content. Not just safe, not just surviving, but genuinely content with my life and who I was becoming. September brought the start of 3rd grade for Ethan and new beginnings for both of us. I enrolled in online classes at the community college. I had never finished my degree, having dropped out when I got pregnant with Ethan, and Richard insisted I did not need education. But I needed it now, not for anyone else but for myself. I wanted to prove that I could do it, that I was more than what they had tried to make me believe I was. I studied business administration, thinking that maybe someday I could run my own restaurant or cafe. The work was challenging, especially while managing the diner and raising Ethan, but I loved it. Each assignment completed felt like another victory, another piece of evidence that I was capable and intelligent and worthy. Maria was my biggest cheerleader. She would watch Ethan sometimes while I studied, and she always asked about my classes with genuine interest. "You are going to do great things," she told me one evening. "You have already done great things, but you are going to do more." "I just want a good life for Ethan," I said. "And you will have it. But do not forget to want things for yourself too. You deserve good things, Sarah, not just as a mother, but as a woman, as a person." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I had defined myself only through Ethan, through my role as his protector and provider. But I was more than that. I was Sarah. I had dreams and goals and desires that had nothing to do with anyone else. It was okay to pursue those things. It was more than okay. It was necessary. In October, almost a year after Eleanor's failed attempt to contact me online, I received a letter. It came to the diner, forwarded through some convoluted series of addresses. The return address was her name, written in her precise handwriting. My hands shook as I held it. Frank saw my face and asked if I was okay. I told him I needed a moment and went into the back office. I sat there staring at that envelope for a long time, debating whether to open it or just throw it away. Finally, curiosity won out. I tore it open carefully as if it might contain something dangerous. The letter was 2 pages long, handwritten. Eleanor's voice came through in every line, that particular mixture of self-righteousness and manipulation that I knew so well. She wrote about how much she missed Ethan, how she prayed for us every day, how she had been attending therapy and church counseling to work on her mistakes. She wrote about Richard's suffering in prison and how the family needed to forgive and move forward. She wrote about how blood was thicker than water and how children needed their grandparents. Not once did she apologize directly. Not once did she take full responsibility. Every sentence was carefully crafted to make herself the victim, to make me seem unreasonable for keeping Ethan away, to suggest that I was the one causing harm by denying them access to their grandson. I read it through twice, and then I did something I would not have been capable of a year ago. I wrote a response. My letter was short and to the point. I wrote, Eleanor, I received your letter. I want to be clear about something. What happened in that house was not a mistake. It was abuse. You did not just enable Richard's violence. You participated in it. You held the adhesive that sealed my mouth. You encouraged him to hurt me. You terrorized your own grandson. These are not mistakes. These are choices. You chose cruelty over kindness. You chose power over love. You chose your ego over the well-being of a child. Those choices have consequences. The consequences that you do not get to be part of our lives. Not now, not ever. Ethan is thriving without you. He is happy, healthy, and safe. That is more important than any relationship with grandparents who hurt him. Do not contact us again. If you do, I will pursue legal action for harassment. We are done. We are free. And we are never coming back. I signed it, sealed it, and mailed it before I could second-guess myself. It felt like closing a door that I had left slightly ajar. Now it was shut, locked, bolted. Whatever tiny part of me that had still felt obligated to that family, that had still carried guilt about breaking those bonds, was finally released. Officer Miller called me a few days later. Eleanor had shown up at the police station with my letter, demanding that Miller do something about my threats and my alienation of Ethan. Miller had calmly explained that Eleanor was the one under a restraining order, that my letter was not threatening, but was simply establishing boundaries, and that if Eleanor contacted me again, she would be arrested. She left in a huff, Miller reported, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. But I think she got the message this time. How are you doing with all this? I'm okay, I said, and I meant it. I'm better than okay, actually. I feel like I finally closed that chapter completely. Good, that's exactly what you need to do. Keep moving forward, Sarah. You're doing amazing. Thanksgiving came, and Maria invited Ethan and me to celebrate with her and her extended family. Her house was filled with warmth, laughter, and the incredible smells of traditional Salvadoran food mixed with American turkey and stuffing. Ethan played with Maria's nieces and nephews, running through the house with the uninhibited joy of a child who felt completely safe. As we sat around the table and each person shared what they were thankful for, I felt tears prick my eyes. When it was my turn, I said, I'm thankful for second chances. I'm thankful for the people who helped us when we needed it most. I'm thankful for my son's resilience. And I'm thankful that we get to build our own traditions now, our own family based on love and respect instead of fear and obligation. Maria reached over and squeezed my hand. And we are thankful for you, she said warmly. You and Ethan have brought so much joy to my life. You are family now. That was the moment I realized something profound. Family was not just about blood. It was not about obligation or duty or guilt. Real family was about choice. It was about people who showed up for you, who celebrated your victories and held you through your struggles, who loved you not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Maria was more family to me than Eleanor had ever been. Officer Miller was more family than Richard had ever been. The community we had built here in the city was more family than the one I had left behind. Christmas that year was magical in its simplicity. Ethan and I got a small tree and decorated it with ornaments we made together. I bought him the Lego set he had been wanting and a few new books. We spent Christmas morning in our pajamas, drinking hot chocolate and opening presents, slowly savoring each moment. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells, no fear that someone would get drunk and ruin everything. Just peace and joy and love. In the afternoon, we video called Dr. Chen, Ethan's therapist, as part of his continued care. She asked him how he was feeling about the holidays. Ethan thought about it carefully, then said, Last Christmas I was scared all the time. This Christmas I'm just happy. I like being happy better. Dr. Chen smiled. Me too, Ethan. Happy is much better. And you know what? You deserve to be happy. Always. After the call, Ethan looked at me with those wise, too old eyes and said, Mommy, can I ask you something? Of course, baby, anything. Do you think Daddy and Grandma are having a good Christmas? The question caught me off guard. I chose my words carefully. I don't know, sweetheart, but here's what I do know. We can't control what kind of Christmas they have. We can only control our own. And our Christmas is good because we choose to make it good. Does that make sense? He nodded slowly. I think so. It's like they had chances to make things good, but they chose to be mean instead. So now they don't get to be part of the good things. Sometimes children understand complex truths with stunning clarity. That's exactly right, I said, pulling him into a hug. You're so smart, you know that. I learned from the best, he said, hugging me back fiercely. The new year arrived with promise and possibility. I set goals for myself. Finish my associate degree, save enough for a down payment on a house, continue building a stable life for Ethan, and most importantly, continue healing. Not just from the trauma of the past, but healing into the fullest version of who I could be. In February, I received notification that Richard's sentence had been extended due to his involvement in a fight while incarcerated. He would serve at least 2 more years beyond his original sentence. When Officer Miller told me this, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger, not pity, just nothing. He had become irrelevant to my life, a character in a story I no longer read. Eleanor, on the other hand, was suffering in ways that no prison could inflict. Through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I heard that she had become a recluse. She rarely left her house. The church had asked her to step down from all positions. Her friends had abandoned her. She lived alone in that house where so much violence had occurred, surrounded by memories and regrets. Part of me, the part that was still learning to balance justice with compassion, felt a twinge of something for her. Not pity exactly, but perhaps a recognition of the tragedy of a life wasted on cruelty and control. She had had opportunities to be different, to choose love over manipulation, to be a real grandmother instead of an enabler of abuse. She had squandered every single one of those opportunities. Now she lived with the consequences, and those consequences were loneliness and isolation. But that was not my problem to solve. I had spent enough years trying to fix things that were not my responsibility. Eleanor's life was hers to fix or not fix. My life was mine to build. Spring came again, bringing with it a sense of renewal and growth. Ethan turned 9 years old, and we threw a proper party this time, inviting his whole class to a local park. We had pizza and cake and games, and I watched my son run and play and laugh without a shadow of fear on his face. This was who he was meant to be all along. Happy, carefree, loved. One of his teachers pulled me aside during the party. I just wanted to tell you that Ethan is one of the most empathetic children I've ever taught. He's always the first to help a classmate who's struggling, always the one to include kids who are left out. Whatever you're doing at home, it's working. I thanked her, my heart swelling with pride. Ethan had been through hell, but he had not let it make him cruel. Instead, it had made him kind, had given him the ability to recognize pain in others and respond with compassion. That was the greatest victory of all. In May, I walked across a stage in a rented auditorium and received my associate degree in business administration. Maria and Ethan were in the audience, cheering louder than anyone else. I had maintained a 4.0 GPA while working full-time and raising my son alone. I had done something I once believed was impossible. As I held that diploma in my hands, I thought about the woman I had been 2 years ago. Silent, broken, trapped. That woman would not have believed this moment was possible. But here I was, proof that transformation was real, that you could rise from the ashes of your old life and become something entirely new. The summer of my 30th birthday brought another milestone. Frank, the owner of the diner, decided to retire. He offered to sell me the business at a price I could almost afford with a loan. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Me owning a business, running my own restaurant. It seemed like a dream, the kind of dream I had stopped allowing myself to have years ago. I discussed it with Maria, with Officer Miller, with my therapist. Everyone encouraged me to go for it. You've been managing that place for over a year, Maria pointed out. You know every aspect of the business. You have good relationships with the suppliers and the staff. You're ready for this. I took out a small business loan, my hands shaking as I signed the papers. Frank handed over the keys, with tears in his eyes. Take care of her, he said, meaning the diner. She's been good to me. She'll be good to you too. I renamed it Sarah's Place. Simple, direct, mine. I changed nothing about the food or the service, but I added small touches that made it feel more welcoming. Fresh flowers on each table, better lighting, a kid's corner with books and coloring supplies. I wanted it to be the kind of place where people felt safe and cared for, the kind of place I wished had existed when I was at my lowest. The business thrived. Word spread about the friendly atmosphere and the good food and the owner who remembered everyone's name. We became a neighborhood fixture, a place where people celebrated birthdays and mourned losses and simply came to feel connected to community. One afternoon in September, exactly 2 years after our escape, Officer Miller came into the diner. She sat at the counter and ordered coffee. When I brought it to her, she said, "I have some news. Richard is being released early for good behavior. He'll be out in November." My stomach dropped. Even though I had known this day would come eventually, hearing it made everything feel suddenly unstable. Does he know where we are? No, and I've made sure it stays that way. The parole board has strict conditions for his release. He's not allowed to leave the state. He has to attend mandatory counseling. He has to